Every time I've heard this recently, which has been about 3 times, one thing comes to my mind. John Titor, the so-called time traveler, who talked about, again, 2008, he said, would be the last time there was any official Olympics. But so much of what he said is coming true. It's just that those dates have come and gone. But you can look at everything he talked about and say, oh my gosh, that really does seem like he's talking about nowadays, right? And the odd thing was some of the things he said that were really not that important have actually happened when he said they would. For example, I like to use this example. Someone asked him if the Chinese ever go to space. He says you'd be happy to know within a few years that'll happen. Sure enough, a few years later, it happened. They finally sent their first man into space. So some of the more important stuff, like, Civil War, and there's a problem with the elections that a civil war stems from. Has there ever been an election in the last 15, 20 years that you would bet on there's going to be a problem with it versus the one we're about to have this year? Is there any other one you'd say, whoa, that was a really, we're going to have some problems with that one? Or is 2016 already looking like, oh my God, this is going to be the one there's going to be some major problems with? They're going to steal the election from Trump. Delegates and everything else. So one of the things he also said, the Olympics. There will no more official Olympics. And I find it interesting that they're supposed to be in Brazil. They've raked in around $1 billion worth of advertising money for the Olympics. Ad sales top $1 billion. In a country, Brazil, which is on the brink of default. And they just had their largest deficit ever. Well, they have it right now, the largest ever. There's a scandal over there. The president, the former president, and they're trying to impeach him, and the new president made the old president a member of their cabinet to try to stop any investigations from going on, and, basically say, well, I'm a cabinet member, go, F off because you can't mess with me, I'm untouchable now. Yet there's a whole bunch of charges against, if something happens in Brazil, and worse than it already is, and they don't have the elections, it's like a last minute cancellation, and then the rest of the world says, you know what, we don't have time to change it to somewhere else, that's just too much, we're not going to have the elections this year. If I see that happen, I'm going to go reread the John Titor story again online, like I did a while back. It was like a 4-part series, it was so long, to refresh everybody's memory. I've got all of that stuff saved in my emails. All the John Titor information. I will be coming back out here for part 2. Should that happen. Brazil posts largest budget deficit ever as Rousseff cries coup. Olympic ad sales top $1 billion, zero hedge. On Tuesday, embattled Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff was dealt a bitter blow when PMDB, the party of VP Michael Temer, and House Speaker Eduardo Cunha, officially left the coalition government. Quote, dialogue, maybe this is a translation, dialogue, I regret to say, has been exhausted. Tourism Minister Henrique Eduardo Alves, a PMDB leader and former Speaker of the lower house of Congress, said on Monday as he resigned from Rousseff's cabinet. To let the market tell it, a complete political meltdown is great news. As we showed yesterday, and as we've discussed on a number of occasions this month, the more precarious things get politically in Brazil, the harder the BRL and Brazilian risk assets rally. Why? Because the assumption is that when it comes to the country's floundering economy, anything is preferable to the current arrangement. With output in free fall, inflation running in double digits, and unemployment marking an inexorable rise, it's difficult to imagine how things could possibly get any worse. Double-digit inflation. currencies devaluing, etc. How many times have I come out here and said, man, oh man, if you had precious metals in any other country other than the U.S., you'd be sitting real pretty, even with the manipulation still ongoing of precious metals prices. In Brazil, it would be looking really pretty. In Venezuela, even more pretty. You would be sitting on a fortune if you had precious metals in either of those two countries. You've had them for a few years, whatever, and this crap happened. You would be loving life. You would be the one, as I mentioned, you would be the one on the, if there's a such thing as Brazilian Craigslist, there's got to be something similar, right? Or Venezuelan, sell it online, Craigslist, something, whatever they use. I've got such and such for sale, fire sale. I need money badly, as everyone knows. But everyone else also needs money badly, so why am I even putting this online to sell it? Because there can be no buyers. Oh, but my phone's ringing. Hello? Oh, I do have a buyer. Just not at that price. Well, considering it's been listed for 2 months now, I haven't had a single person call me. Yeah, I'll take the money. Yeah, I don't want to part with it for that little bit, but I honestly don't have a choice right now. I gotta eat, gotta feed my family. All right, take care. And on the other line, who called? Was someone that had precious metals, plenty of money to play with. Buy that little thing. I've always wanted one of those. Buy one of those. I always want one of those. Oh, your house is for sale too? I'll go ahead and buy that cash, or trade in the silver or gold cash. Buy your house because your house prices are going to be depressed at the same time. Indeed, the prospect that Rousseff and Lula, which was the former president, will be sent packing, has created so much upward pressure on the BRL, which is their currency, that the central bank has begun selling reverse swaps to keep a lid on the currency lest its rapid appreciation should end up short-circuiting a much-needed economic adjustment. Meanwhile, Brazilian stocks have soared this year amid the turmoil. Of course, this state of affairs simply isn't sustainable. As Craig Botham, an emerging markets economist at Schroeder Investment Management put it, you don't invest in a place where you don't know who's in charge. Right, and you also don't invest in a place where the economic fundamentals get worse by the day. Gold and silver would be even better as this continues. Just this morning, for instance, we got the latest read on the fiscal deficit, and it was, for lack of a better word, an absolute disaster. The budget gap was the largest on record for Brazil and came in wildly above expectations. Brazilian deficit, I could see them speaking in Spanish. I was kind of Chinese version of Spanish. The Brazilian deficit today is unexpectedly Telemundo. No. Very expectedly, because these are all symptoms of dying empires. The primary deficit printed at 2.1% in February, up from 1.75% the previous month. While revenues are falling sharply due to the economic situation at a rate of 12 to 13% a year, expenses continue to grow. Tulio Maciel, head of the central bank's economic research department, told reporters on Wednesday. Meanwhile, debt to GDP continues to rise, and here's Goldman Sachs with the full breakdown of today's dismal data. The overall public sector fiscal deficit, primary surplus minus interest payments, remained broadly stable at a very large 10.8% of GDP in February, substantially above the 6.6% deficit recorded a year ago. The 12-month net interest bill dropped to 8.6% of GDP in February compared to 9.1% in January. The consolidated public sector primary fiscal deficit climbed to 2.1% of GDP, up from 1.75 the month before, just a month before. Gross general government debt worsened to 67.6% of GDP in February, up from 67% 57.4 in February and 57.2 at the end of 2014. A deep, permanent structural fiscal adjustment remains front and center on the policy agenda to restore both domestic and external balance. In our assessment, at the end of the fiscal consolidation process, Brazil needs to end up with a primary surplus of 3% to 3.5% of GDP. This would be the level of primary surplus that would put gross public debt on a clear declining trajectory, something that is required for Brazil to rebuild fiscal buffers and regain room to use fiscal policy counter-cyclically whenever needed and appropriate. Now, obviously, this is a long, long way for Brazil for them to go to get back to primary surplus at all, let alone push the black ink up to 3% of GDP. The idea that this is going to turn around the second Rousseff leaves the presidential palace is laughable at best. And speaking of laughable, have a look at this rather amusing bit from Citigroup. Rousseff impeachment won't sustain Brazil rally. As the likelihood of President Dilma Rousseff's impeachment increases, investors will take a step back. It might be the case of buying the rumor and selling the fact. In other words, investors might suddenly wake up to the fact that an intractable political crisis is most assuredly not risk positive. Meanwhile, Rousseff is back on the tape, likening the impeachment proceedings to a coup. Presidents must be chosen in free elections, he said on Wednesday. Countdown to impeachment, around 45 days. And finally, it's worth noting that according to the latest figures, NBC has sold $1 billion in national ads for the Summer Olympics in Rio. We've surpassed the $1 billion mark 4 months ahead of the 2012 Summer Games in London. Seth Winter, NBC Sports Executive Vice President of Advertising Sales, said in a statement, $1 billion, that's a lot of funds. Zero Hedge says, $1 billion, that's a lot of refunds, Seth. So, again, I read something like this, and God forbid the Olympics don't happen. There's a major coup taking place, and people in an uproar, and there's rioting and protesting, and she's not leaving. She's supposed to be impeached. You just see something happening. Now we can't do the Olympics. It's crazy here. The rest of the world doesn't want to go there. It's too late to pick another place and do it. Too much involved to get that going, so we just cancel it. And I'll say, God forbid that happens. Because then it's time to crack open the old John Titor story and reread it with maybe a new understanding that he definitely knew what was coming. Whether he's a time traveler or not, knew what was coming, had some kind of knowledge somehow, and put it off on purpose so that the club, the government, which he couldn't stand, would never been able to pick up on it because it was so far off. When the time frames came, they would see, yeah, he does kind of look like he knows what we're doing, what we're about, but none of this stuff has happened, really. I mean, yeah, he got a few things right, but it's just someone talking crap on the internet. And then a bunch of years later, boop, 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 things start falling in place just as he said. That hasn't exactly happened, but man, the climate for that, political climate, the public, social climate is ripe for it. And as we see these elections go down, there's going to be some fireworks like you've never seen before. And if it is literally stolen from Donald Trump, I do believe John Titor's comment about what starts the Civil War, a problem with the elections, and remember what he said about the president at the time. She would be more concerned with keeping up the political status quo, or status quo, so to speak, more than anything else. That was his comment. And the president before that president would be driving a wedge further into the Bill of Rights. Have you seen any of the executive orders Mr. Obama has passed? Speaking of driving a wedge into the Bill of Rights. and the National Defense Authorization Acts that happen like every year, and the stuff they've squeaked into there. And maybe the flagship healthcare law, which is 2,000 pages, mostly not to do with healthcare, and a whole host of other things. He has absolutely driven a wedge into the Bill of Rights further than it was. You could argue the same thing about George Bush. He was the founding father of that, for God's sakes. But Obama took the torch and ran with it. And then after he took the torch and ran with it, the next one is going to take the torch and run with it. And that next one, which again, who's on the front cover of the 2016 Economist magazine run by the Rothschild family? Hillary Clinton, as well as Bill Clinton, off to the side. She's like front of the pack in the magazine. Ain't no Trump, ain't no Bernie Sanders, ain't no Ted Cruz, John Cusack, ain't whatever Cusack, the actor, whatever the hell you want to call him. None of them's on this magazine cover. So it looks like a he/she president may be in the works for us. And if that is the case, you will look at John Titor's statement in a whole new light, because he referred to the previous president or leader, as he said, your president or leader was, drove a wedge further into the Bill of Rights. What about the next president? He/she was more concerned with keeping up the status quo. In other words, politics as usual. I got in here, I promised you everything, and now I'm not doing anything, and the club is going to get everything they want. Banks, you need a bailout? No problem. Banks, you want this? No problem. Government, more further wedge in the Bill of Rights? No problem. Toe that line. Why? And I've said this so many times. Why would he ever have to use the words he/she to be politically correct? Has there ever been a she president? Just say he. The next president, he was more concerned with keeping the status quo going. But he didn't. He said he/she. In all these years, that's bothered me, because I haven't seen that she yet. And then I saw Hillary running. Remember with Obama, with who's going to get it? They both got on a private plane somewhere, flew off. Again, they went to the Bilderberg meeting, and it was decided there who's going to be the next president. So we saw who came out. She took the other position, and she was probably promised at that time, I bet, you'll be next. Let him have it this time, you get the next one. Okay. So FBI is looking into the Hillary email scandals. They've got 2 judges giving them discovery access now, and I can't wait to see how this goes. Can't wait. So, all we can do is stand by a little bit longer and see what happens. Take care.